step how to put this kit together and how great it sounds. Connecting the dowel to the neck, the 3 Phillips head screws, and sanding takes a lot of time. I speed it up a little bit with a palm sander, at least for the initial rough sanding. And the reason I put the 2 pieces together is so that when we sand, it all ends up even. Alright, so I've done the bulk of the rough sanding with the palm sander, and I don't really like to do the final sand with the palm sander because it leaves little orbital marks. So it really is best to sand by hand. I'm going to use some 320 grit sandpaper. On the palm sander I was using 220. And we'll just sand it by hand now. After the 320, I'll move up to 500 or 600 grit, and then it'll be ready for varnish. And don't forget to wear your dust mask. Some people are allergic to hardwood dust, and who wants that in your lungs anyway? Now for this demonstration, I'm using a neck that I would not normally sell. I didn't want to throw it away, so I'm using it today. You see you've got kind of a knot on it, and another knot here, and a knot here. I filled them, so I think it'll turn out just fine, but I don't want my customers to have to deal with stuff like that. So keep that in mind when you look at this, and really it can look quite nice when it's all finished up. But if you buy a kit from me, you'll never have something so extreme to deal with. When you're ready for the finish, I recommend a light, clear varnish. This is really beautiful wood. There's no reason to put a stain on it. You should use a varnish to bring out the natural colors. Stains, I'm not a big fan. There's right applications for them, but if you're already starting with a really nice wood, there's no reason to put a stain on it. So I use True Oil, which is a gunstock finish, because it's kind of thicker and you need less coats to get a nice shiny finish, and I like the shiny look. You can also use teak oil, tung oil, oiled linseed oil. There's tons of varnishes out there. Let's put a coat of True Oil on the gourd. You don't have to put any finish on the gourd. It won't hurt to put one on. I don't usually mess with the inside. You could coat the inside if you wanted to. It's a little rough, you might need to clean it out a little bit more. But I'm just going to leave it alone and coat the outside. Make sure it's clean. There might be some pencil markings on it from where I marked it to cut the holes. We'll just get an old rag and put a nice coat of True Oil on. We'll let it dry for a couple hours at least before we do anything else. The skin has been soaking for a while. You only really need to soak it for about half an hour in warm water. And you can add things to the water to change the color of the skin. I was soaking this in my steam runoff for another kit I make, so it's kind of taken on the color of the walnut wood that I was steaming, and that's fine. Some people put tea leaves or coffee grounds in the water. So let's get it on the gourd. The gourd, I put a coat of true oil on it, just one coat, and it's dry now. I let it dry overnight. So let's dry the skin off a little bit. This is really important. Put some wood glue on the gourd. I use Type Bond 3. Type Bond 2 would probably work too. I think that's waterproof. So when I would tack skins on without glue, they would always burst in the winter. You know, with the heat running, it really dries out the air, and it will pull the skin really tight. And it's not too hard to pull through the tacks. So with the glue, you are securing the skin more and making it less likely to break away. Less problems. I send different tacks with each kit. It's just whatever I can get. I run through them so fast. So don't expect a certain kind of tack. So we lay the skin over, center it up, and start moving on the tacks. Now these first 4 tacks are really important. So what I do, I find the hole for the neck, tack about ½ an inch down from the edge of the gourd, pop it in. Yes, I know my fingernails are very dirty. They always are. Opposite the first tack is the next one, right where the tailpiece would be. Now this, you want to pull the skin kind of tight, not too tight, just a few pounds of pressure on it. Work the tack in. See that? Now the next, pull the skin tight again, wiggle the tack in. Never try to pound the tacks in with a hammer, you'll break the gourd. I've actually had people do that. And then again, opposite that third tack, pull it tight, and by now the wrinkles will almost be gone. It's something you always want to watch. Keep an eye on your wrinkles and pull them out. Now for the rest of the tacks, we're just going to keep pulling a little bit and just keep splitting the difference. We've got our 4 starting tacks, so then we'll go here, opposite, and we'll start again and split the difference. I include a lot of tacks, so you can add a whole bunch if you want to. I would say add at least 20 or more. And once you get to a certain point, I don't even bother doing the crisscross. I'm just filling in the gaps now. can always pull a tack out and move it a little bit. But I would say wait till you're done, because you only have so long to work with the skin. You want to make sure it's on there nice and tight first. This is kind of hard on your thumbs, so you can wear a thimble if you want. Or sometimes I wrap my thumb in tape if I'm doing a lot of them. So sometimes the spacing isn't perfect. Like here, I'll go back and pull this one. Just use a flathead or a pocket knife. There we go. Just try to make the spacing look good. Doesn't really matter, but it's all how primitive do you want it to look. And I will fix this one now for you. Let's put that back in straight. There we go. There we go. Good enough. Let's secure the skin. Let's make it flat so it dries nice and flat and not all crinkled up. Just going to use some masking tape on it. The skin has dried overnight. It's nice and tight. You can hear it's got a good ring to it. See, the tape helped the skin dry flat onto the gourd. So I like to cut just below the tacks, and I've got a fresh razor blade here, and I'm going to use a little bit of cardstock to protect the gourd. Alright, I have sanded the neck as much as I want to. I could probably sand it for much longer, but keep things moving here and put the oil on. I'm going to do 3 thin coats, just like this. First coat, just real quick. And then the second coat and third coat will make sure we cover everything. You do not want to get varnish in the peg holes or on the tuning pegs. They need to be clean and oil-free surfaces to work properly. so just be careful around those. Alright, I've got 2 coats of True Oil on this neck now, and I'll give you a little tip. Let the second coat fully dry. I varnished it yesterday, so it's dry. Now get some very fine sandpaper. Got some 600 here, that'll work. Or some steel wool, and sand it all down. I had some runs right here, so I'll take care of those. So once you've completely sanded it, add the third and final coat, and that'll really bring the whole thing together. Sanding between the last coat, before the last coat, that's how you get a really nice finish. Three coats of True Oil. Turned out pretty nice. Slides into the gourd just like that. Alright, let's get the strings tied onto the tailpiece. Strings come numbered with each kit. The 4th string is the only wound string. So here's how I tie them. Slide the string through the hole and then twist the string around itself 2 to 3 times. Now take the end and put it through the eye you've created. See that? And I kind of guide it, the extra part of the string, back behind the tailpiece to keep everything looking clean. It's basically a slip knot. And once you put some tension on the strings, it'll pull itself and lock into place. Strings are tied onto the tailpiece now, and before we string up the banjo, let's check the string slots on the nut and make sure that the strings are going to fit. The 4th and 3rd string are the thickest, and you might notice a very light pencil mark on one side, and that would be the inside of the instrument. The pencil mark would face the gourd. So I think that's pretty good for the 4th string. The 3rd string is actually thicker than the 4th, so check that one. And it could use a little widening. So I'm just going to fold a piece of sandpaper and use it like a little file. To open that slot. Alright, now a drop of wood glue go on here, and we'll pop it into place. Alright, we've come a long way with this build, and we're ready for the final step. Let's get the strings on. The friction pegs are tapered, and you want to make sure there's no varnish in the peg holes, and don't put varnish on the pegs. This will affect how they grip the wood, needs to be wood on wood contact. The farther up you push the peg, the tighter it'll get. So keep that in mind when you're tuning. You can kind of lock the string into place. And the strings will go through a stretching period for a day or so. So you might have to keep retuning, but they'll settle eventually and it should hold its tuning quite well. I like to wind my strings on this side of every peg. And also this is just the way I laid it out for the peg head, so this works the best. Now you see there's not much of a height difference between the peg head and the nut. A lot of peg heads are traditionally angled downward. We've got kind of a scoop out, kind of like what you'll find on electric guitars. Like, think of a Stratocaster headstock. And I do this for production reasons. There is no real slope to the headstock. But that's okay. We just need to get tension on the strings here at the nut. So we guide the string down and keep it as close to the headstock as possible. So I start by wrapping it over itself one time and then under itself from then on. And with my index finger, I'm guiding the string down the peg. So always keep it as close to the headstock as possible. That's giving us our downward tension, and that'll keep the strings from popping out of the nut. Over one time and then under. Fifth string is attached the same way. And to keep the extra part of the string out of the way, I kind of wrap the string over itself to hold the string straight up. So I hold the extra part of the string in my mouth because you really need a third hand to do this. There we go. Trim the extra. You see it sticks straight up out of the way. Now that the strings are all attached to the pegs, we'll come down here to the tailpiece and tighten up the knots. Now the strings will go through a stretching period, but they'll hold tuning after a couple days. Alright, let's pop the bridge into place. The scale length of this instrument is 24.8 inches, and all that means is at 24.8 inches from the nut, this double OG is going to be indicating fret positions, the 5th, 7th, 10th, and 12th. 12th fret splits the scale in half. You can move the bridge wherever you want because it's a fretless instrument, but the OG is only going to be indicating those fret positions when you have the bridge in a specific place. let's tune it up. You can go up to G tuning. I like the sound of it a little bit lower. Usually around E or F is where I end up with my Gourd Banjos. It really was that easy just to put this kit together. I took a span of about a week just working on this whenever I had the spare time, a few minutes here and there. Now, you could definitely take your time, make it a week or two project. You could knock it out in a weekend, or if you choose to not sand or varnish the neck, you could really put it together in an evening and be playing it the next day once the skin is dried. I have it tuned a few steps lower than G. I tend to just tune it by ear and tune it up to what the gourd is telling me. Every gourd is a little bit different, and it has a nice little resonance of its own. So just finding the tuning. If you play by yourself, you can really just put it in anything that sounds good. So check it out, carverbanjos.com, the do-it-yourself Gourd Banjo kit.